Hello YouTube, we're back again with another tier list video breaking down the greatest NFL teams of all time. Going through the tiers, and we'll go through all 32 teams that ever been in the league. Well, the main ones. I'm not going to go over the ones that are now defunct, but these are the teams that are still in there, of course. And we'll go through tier to tier, and let's get into it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe and all that crap. But let's get into it. With our first team, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are going to be, here. Let's go to the categories first. Best of all time, obviously the best teams ever. Great pedigree, teams that have won multiple championships but are still below the best of all time. Teams are won at least one Super Bowl. I wanted to make a category just say these teams at least were great for at least one season. Were truly great. Bridesmaid and Not the Bride. These are teams that always seem to come up short, a la the Vikings and other teams like that. And the worst of all time. Obviously, these teams just can never sustain any long-term sense of success, whether it be championship-wise or even just getting to the playoffs. These teams just don't seem to get it. But there might be some of these teams in the list may have turned the corner. They're just a few moves away from really, truly moving up. But let's start with the Jaguars. We will put them in Bridesmaid and Not the Bride because they have had periods of success. And when they first came into the league in the late 90s, they had a run. They had some good teams in the mid 2000s. Maurice Jones-Drew era had a couple decent teams. And of course, the 2017 that was famously robbed of a potential Super Bowl victory. Let's be honest, they were playing against the Patriots in 2017. They had a 10-point lead, had a fumble recovery. Miles Jack brought it all the way back to the end zone. The NFL told the refs, oh, he was actually down. And then the comeback happened, and the Jaguars were never able to really win after that. But let's be honest, that game was truly rigged for the Patriots. And if you disagree with me, watch the footage of Miles Jack being down. He wasn't down. He clearly got the fumble. Clearly took it all the way back to the house. Would have been a 17-point lead with like less than 10 minutes left. No one, even for Tom Brady against a supposedly good defense like the Jaguars, would not have been able to come back. But I mean, the Jaguars could be close. They do supposedly have the quarterback. Their defense is slowly getting better, adding some more pieces on offense. Now, of course, the whole Calvin Ridley experiment kind of failed, but they still have some playmakers, and maybe they can turn the corner. But who knows with the division that it is becoming? Who knows if they'll actually get to that point? Because we have another team. We're going to put the Texans in the worst of all time, just because they've had a lot of long periods of just no success whatsoever. But on a caveat, they have the quarterback now. And CJ Stroud has shown that all you really need is a great quarterback, and all your other issues can go to the background. He single-handedly brought the Houston Texans to where they were last year. Yes, the defense definitely was improved from the year before that, but let's be honest, without CJ Stroud, that team is not making the playoffs and certainly not winning against the Browns. And I think they can turn around the corner. I mean, they had some periods in the early to mid 2000s with J.J. Watt where they were in the playoffs, but they always came up against the Patriots and they always got blown out. So, I mean, they're worst of all time just because they haven't been around that long and their windows of success were very short-lived. But with a new quarterback, as long as he avoids a sophomore slump, he should be able to get to where they need to be, and maybe, just maybe a dark horse for the Super Bowl this year. I think that's a little much right now, but based on what they've done this offseason, they can perhaps make that happen. And of course, we have the best team of all time. Obviously, the Green Bay Packers are clearly the best team of all time. Any haters out there, you can suck it. 13 world championships. The greatest dynasty in the history of football. 5 championships in 7 years in the 60s. That is better than the Patriots. That's better than the Steelers. That's better than the Cowboys. Better than the 49ers. It is the best dynasty in the history of sports. And suck it, Chiefs. Even if you win a third in a row this year, still can't beat that run by the Green Bay Packers in the 60s. And it doesn't matter. They had a great team that they've had long, extended periods of success. Super Bowl with Favre, Super Bowl with Rodgers, of course. Bart Starr won 5 championships, including 2 Super Bowls. They won championships in the 30s and the early 40s. And yes, I know a lot of NFL naysayers today just want to say, oh, anything before the Super Bowl? Yeah, that doesn't count. Well, bullshit, it doesn't. It totally counts. Still 13 world championships, still 6 more than the Patriots, still 7 more than the Steelers, and still 8 more than the Cowboys. So, second, and who knows, with Jordan Love being as good as he was last year and poised to have an even better year this year, a new dynasty could be afoot for the Packers. But then again, it's the NFL, and with the darlings that are the Chiefs going on right now, maybe that won't happen. But they've definitely had long periods of success, long periods of no success in the 70s and the 80s, one of the most dreadful period for any team in NFL history. But clearly the best team of all time. Let me know in the comments how wrong I am, because I'm sure I'll get some naysayers because call me a homer, but it's just the stats don't lie. They're clearly the best team of all time. Sorry. The Cowboys will be in the great pedigree tier because, of course, they had several long periods of success. 70s, they had 2 Super Bowls. They had 3 Super Bowls in the 90s, and they haven't done anything since. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to put them in the middle tier, but they have won more than 1 Super Bowl. It's just that the whole last 30 years of not winning anything is kind of wearing on fans. There's still, Cowboys fans still aren't as objectionable as, like, Eagles fans or Vikings fans. I mean, they're from Texas. They're good people. For the most part, they're just really haughty about their team. So I'm not going to begrudge Cowboys fans that much. Most of you people in Texas that root for the Cowboys are decent, freedom-loving Americans. And was just your love for the Patriots or the love for the Cowboys feels a bit misguided at times, especially this year with the talk of being all in when you lost so many players. Cowboys will still be a tough out this year, I'm sure. They will definitely be in the playoffs for sure, because they always are. It's just a matter of can they do it in the playoffs. And maybe they can, maybe they won't. But they definitely belong in this year because they do have championship category and are tied for the 3rd most Super Bowls of all time. So that should give them some credit. They do deserve some credit. Let's be nicer to Cowboys fans. They're not the worst fans of all time by a long shot. There are worse fans on this list for sure. Bears fans. Now, I guess I could put them in great pedigree because they do have the championships in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. But it's just, they are still so enamored with 1985. They're so enamored with that 1 Super Bowl, the greatest defense of all time, supposedly the monster of the Midway. The Bears fans are so obsessed with that period, and it drives a lot of other NFL fans off the wall. It's 1 season. You had a great season, but what happened after that? Your defense slowly fell apart. Your team slowly fell apart, and it's been nothing but crap for the rest of the last 30 years. Largely because of nepotism, because the McCaskies are still running the Bears. For the Bears to really, truly ever see success, the original family just needs to sell, and there needs to be a new team. And the whole hype this year about Caleb Williams, I think it's just a lot of chutzpah. There's just not a lot there. I mean, the whole pink lip gloss and the painted nails. I think he is a journeyman quarterback at best, and people hoisting him up as the next great thing. It's just like, look at what he did in college. He had good years, but last year was fucking dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Stop giving Caleb Williams a pass because USC's defense was really bad. That doesn't change the fact that Caleb Williams threw a lot of interceptions last year, was a big reason they lost a lot of games. So the Bears still have great pedigree, of course, 30s, 40s, 50s, one of the best teams of all time. The George House Bears were one of the best teams of all time for several different years. Of course, the 85 Bears. The 2006 Bears were more of a fluke. I believe it was 2006 or 2007. But, yeah. If the Bears wouldn't be so obsessed with 85, I think a lot of NFL fans and Packer fans also would be able to give the Bears more credit. But since they're still obsessed with that, it's just not going to change anytime soon. And the Bills are clearly in the bridesmaid and not the bride category because, darn, you feel bad. I really do. I mean, they're like the Green Bay of the AFC. Similar fan base, similar makeup, similar cities, but 4 Super Bowls in a row and no victories. And we're all high on a lot of fans. Now, the 70s Bills had some decent amount of success and really no playoff success with O.J. Simpson. The 80s were nothing special. The 90s, or the late 80s, early 90s, of course, were their Super Bowl era. And then after Jim Kelly left and we had other quarterbacks in there, long sustained record of non-success because they ran into the Patriots and the Patriots just beat them mercilessly for 20 years. Now, maybe, just maybe, I think Josh Allen is definitely the quarterback to win them the Super Bowl, but it's a matter of, can they get everything lined up? Can they avoid all the injuries that they have every year? And maybe they can. I still think they have enough in them to actually succeed in the Super Bowl and succeed in the league long term, but until they can get over that ghost that is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, don't see that happening anytime soon, but definitely a bridesmaid and not the bride category for sure. Chiefs are in great championship pedigree. Not as many Super Bowls as Cowboys, but recent success puts them up there, and they are one of the better teams of all time. They had the Super Bowls in the late 60s and 70s, nothing special. 80s, nothing special. Marty Schottenheimer brought them success, but never really get over the hump. Joe Montana nearly brought them to the Super Bowl. Derek Thomas, and then early 2000s had some decent teams, but were always like a quick out. And then once Andy Reid came in, the team really came together. And let's be honest, as good as Patrick Mahomes is, Andy Reid has a large dose of success for him. I mean, without Andy Reid, there's no way Patrick Mahomes reaches his potential. I'm sorry. You have to give Andy Reid credit. Andy Reid really brought this offense together and was really the coach that really made this team successful. Not Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy was a byproduct of Andy Reid. Eric Bieniemy is one of the most overrated coaches in the league, and he's going to continue to fail in Washington or wherever he is now, but never going to be a head coach because he's just not good. Just on a side note, if Eric Bieniemy was going to be a head coach, he would have made it happen like 5-6 years ago, but he still hasn't gotten head coaching praise. He still hasn't. So it's like, what's the deal? Is he just not that good? I'm going to believe he's just not that good. But the Chiefs definitely belong in the great pedigree tier. Not one of the best of all time, but certainly in that tier just below. Broncos definitely are there too. Success in the success in the 80s with some Super Bowl trips with John Elway, but no success. Then the 90s came around, and of course they had the 2 Super Bowls towards the end, back to back. John Elway nearly had his career ruined, if not for the Packers completely falling apart in Super Bowl 31 or Super Bowl 32. John Elway may well have never have won a Super Bowl. He may well have gone into retirement after that Super Bowl. The Packers could very well have 3 straight Super Bowls, to be honest. But the Broncos definitely had success in the 80s, just not a lot of trophy success. 90s, 2 Super Bowls. 2000s were an up and down franchise. Some years good, some years bad. One of those are bridesmaid, not the bride teams of the 2000s. And then 2000, mid 2010s, had that big Super Bowl loss to the Seahawks. Came back with one of the best defensive performances of all time against the Panthers in Super Bowl 50. And they've been a whole lot of crap ever since. But definitely in the great pedigree tier, multiple Super Bowls. And maybe, just maybe, they can turn around. They just need a quarterback to really get that started. The Panthers definitely are one of those teams of all time, because what they did had some early success coming into the league, and were in the championship game against the Packers. Of course, the Packers won and went on to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. 2000s, they were always in the playoffs kind of team with the likes of Jake Delhomme, Steve Smith, and they had that Super Bowl against the Patriots where one of the dumbest things of all time happened. John Casey kicks the ball out of bounds and it puts the Patriots at the 40-yard line with 50 seconds left. One of the dumbest moves in the NFL history, and of course, Tom Brady and the Patriots benefit from crap like that all the time. 2000s, like I said, some success, not a lot of trophy success. Mid 2010s, of course, that Super Bowl against the Broncos where they just kind of failed. Cam Newton kind of failed. Ever since Cam Newton left, they haven't had any real players at the quarterback, and they've just kind of been really towards the bottom tier of the league. I mean, Bryce Young may be the future, but they don't have the draft capital to really improve his prospects going into the year. So probably going to be another bad year for the Panthers. So Panthers will probably be looking at a top 10 or top 5 selection next year, I'm sure. And hopefully they don't trade this pick away this time, because that trade with the Bears, what a doozy that was. Tampa Bay, we'll put them here. Tampa Bay, definitely some success. Of course, infamously had one of the longest stretches of winlessness coming into the league, 0-26, and they finally got their win against the New Orleans Saints, of course. 80s had some success, or made to the NFC Championship game a couple times. 90s, not too much to speak of. Early 2000s, of course, they had the Super Bowl win over the Raiders, which was famously rigged, you could say, because Bill Callahan didn't change any of his signals, and which allowed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to just pick them off all day long, because that game was close after the first quarter. It was a very close game, but then Tampa Bay just pulled it on and just never looked back. Tampa Bay, of course, had the Super Bowl win with the Tom Brady, one of the most rigged Super Bowls you will ever see. I mean, I've never seen an officials rig the game so badly. I mean, it didn't matter if Mike Evans was falling to the ground. If he was falling to the ground, they were going to throw PI penalties all day long. And yeah, they have multiple Super Bowls, so they're worthy of being in this tier. Just not one of my favorite teams of all time. Actually, one of my least favorite teams of all time. The Vikings are definitely one of the bridesmaid and not the bride category. Of course, they had the 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, 4 Super Bowls in their first 10 years. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's really good, but every time this team in the 70s went to the Super Bowl, they got their asses actually absolutely handed them. They had no chance in any of those games. They were just beat down unmercilessly. But the one thing that goes in the Vikings' favor is the fact that for as long as they've been in the league, they just haven't had long periods of big losing seasons. I mean, every now and then they've had a bad season, but they've usually bounced back and had a middle of the road to above 500 record. I mean, let's go over their record. I mean, 70s Super Bowl teams, 80s nothing special, 90s were definitely better. They had a chance to go to the Super Bowl playing against the Falcons. Of course, Mort Anderson missed a field goal, and they famously blew a big lead. allowed the Falcons to the Dirty Birds to make it to the Super Bowl when they were 15-1. Another 15-1 team in the early 2000s blew that game as well. They blew several NFC Championship games in the 2000s against the Saints. They blew that game because Brett Favre decided to pull Brett Favre and throw one of the worst passes you will ever see in the end game scenario. And in the 2000s, or 2010s, they have been a very solid, consistent team. Had several playoff wins, but just never could quite get over the hump. And maybe, just maybe, they are in line for a brand new quarterback in the draft this year. And you're never, by the words of Napoleon Bonaparte, you never want to interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. But if the Vikings really wanted to be good, they should go after J.J. McCarthy and not Drake May. But I have a feeling they're going to go after Drake May. And they're going to have another project quarterback. And in the end, Justin Jefferson is going to say adios to Minnesota. And he's going to hightail it out of here. It's just going to happen. But Vikings definitely are one of those teams of all time. But as an organization-wide, they don't have a lot of sustained long periods of not having any success. It's just not there. And the Patriots are going to be behind the Packers. Yes, the 7 Super Bowls. Of course, they are some of the biggest cheaters of all time. I mean, in my opinion, the Spygate wipes out 3 Super Bowl victories. Probably others as well. I don't consider the Deflategate the biggest thing in the world. I think that was just kind of stupid. I mean, if you're gonna punish somebody, punish them for Spygate, not fucking Deflategate. Of course, they had success in the 80s. A little bit of success. They, of course, ran up against the Bears. Tony Eason, of all quarterbacks from the 83 draft, Tony Eason was not the quarterback that I figured would lead the Patriots to a Super Bowl, but he did. And, of course, against the Bears, he's just got manhandled, got absolutely destroyed, had no shot, never quite put on the weight to really be a big-time NFL quarterback. I think he had the skills, it just he never put on the weight to actually be there. 90s successful, of course, played against the Packers, Super Bowl 31, lost that game, of course. Bill Parcells was successful with them. And, of course, Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. Tom Brady comes in, the most overrated player in the NFL history, Tom Brady. Does everything always win his way? Everything always went Tom Brady's way, and they, of course, won 7 Super Bowls, and definitely belong up there as one of the best teams of all time, despite the fact that at least 3 of their Super Bowls are tainted. Suck it, Patriots fans. 3 of your Super Bowls are tainted because of Spygate. We'll put the Saints here. They do have the 1 Super Bowl win, but a large part of their franchise history has been nothing but failure, disappointment, and just sheer frustration. I mean, coming into the league, of course, famously, their fans wore bags on their heads. They were called the Aints for so long because they just couldn't have any success whatsoever. Hurricane Katrina comes around and that team completely turns around with Drew Brees. I mean, Drew Brees was the true history, a true hero for New Orleans, helping bring that city back to life. They win the Super Bowl. It's still a shame they never won another Super Bowl with Drew Brees. I mean, just think, if they had the defense they had now, with Brees in his heyday after winning their first Super Bowl, my God, they'd have at least 2 or 3 more. And it's sad what happened, and you can never get off the bench with them. Now, as a Saints fan for the Saints, if they really want to be successful and they really want to get off the schneid where they are at now, just blow it up, trade some players, get draft capital, start building the team back up again. Stop trying to play with Derek Carr. I like Derek Carr a lot, but it's just like, he's just not the answer. You have playing with a bunch of expiring contracts, paying aging stars that some of them are still good, but it's just like, at what cost? Trade them while you get a chance and go to the basement for a little bit, build back up, and bring that city back to life again, because I mean, Drew Brees is now walking through that door. If the Saints really want to get back to where they need to be, they should blow it up yesterday. San Francisco definitely belongs up here. 5 Super Bowls. Of course, the 3 with Montana. 4 with Montana, I should say. Then the one with Steve Young, one of the greatest Super Bowl performances of all time. 6 touchdowns against the then San Diego Chargers. They were a decent team in the 70s for periods. 80s were their heyday. The 90s were their heyday. They were good in the late 2000s, early 2000s. They were really bad. And through the mid 2010s, they had good success, some bad success, or bad times as well. And they're kind of like the bridesmaid and not the bride ever since their last Super Bowl with Steve Young. It's been 30 years since they won a Super Bowl, and who knows if it's going to happen. They lost some pieces this year on defense, so I definitely think they're going to take a step back, meaning the Green Bay Packers could definitely take that spot. But historically speaking, they are one of the better teams of all time. Not too many long periods of not having success. Just a pretty solid team throughout most of NFL, through most of their time in the league. Just last 30 years, like the Cowboys. What have you done for me lately? Always seem to get there. Always seem to get right there. They're always right there for Super Bowl victory, and then they run into the Chiefs. Or they run into somebody else, and someone just beats them down. But definitely one of the teams of all time. And they definitely deserve credit for their achievement over time, especially with Joe Montana, Steve Young. They were a great team, and they have been a great team for a long time. The Washington Redskins. Yes, they're the Redskins. I'm not calling them the commies. I call them the commies just so people don't go after me, but let's be honest, they're still the Redskins. And they definitely belong up here for their success in the 80s. 3 Super Bowls. Of course, they beat down the Bills in the Super Bowl. They won 2 others as well. Great defensive teams and with great offense as well. 70s, or they've been one of the oldest teams in existence. The 90s, 80s, and 90s were their best. Early 2000s and most of the 2000s were bad. Most of the 2010s have been bad with some few playoff appearances here and there. But they are one of the better teams of all time. They have great pedigree. Just lately, they may have gotten off the schneid. Finally got rid of Dan Snyder. They can finally move ahead and get better, but who knows if it'll actually happen. It all depends on how they handle their draft this year. Of course, they're going to go after a quarterback in the first round, but we'll see what happens with that. The Chargers are definitely the bridesmaid and not the bride as well. 80s had some success with Dan Fouts. After that, not too much. 90s, they were able to go to the Super Bowl. Of course, they famously got beat down by the 49ers. 2000s, not too much. Or early 2000s, not too much. Drew Brees came in, had some playoff success. Philip Rivers came in, had some playoff success. Were famously screwed against the Patriots because Tom Brady had one of his worst playoff performances ever, but they still managed to win because Marlon fucking McCree can't hold on the ball, fumbles it, the interception away. It's still a shame that Chargers had some great teams in the mid-2000s, great teams. It's a real shame they could never really win a Super Bowl with that team. I mean, they had it all, great defense, great all-time great running back, a great quarterback, not a Hall of Fame quarterback, great wide receivers, great tight end, but it's just they always came up against the Patriots, and as we all know, as fans of other teams besides the Patriots got all the calls every time, and Tom Brady was just Jesus walking on water. It seemed all the time. It just nothing ever shook him, nothing ever shook or bothered him because he knew the rest would bail him out every chance they got, and sure enough, they did against the Chargers several times. Maybe with Jim Harbaugh, they can bring the team back to where they need to be, but who knows? Time will tell. Colts? Oh, wait, no. Colts? great pedigree as well. Super Bowl in the late 60s. Super Bowl loss against against Joe Namath and the Jets. Total fluke, that one. Super Bowl in the mid 2000s with Peyton Manning. It's a shame that Andrew Luck had all his injury issues because, man, he was a great quarterback. Had he stayed healthy, he probably would have taken the Colts to at least 1 or 2 Super Bowls and probably won 1 or 2 of them as well. We'll see what they're doing with Tony Richardson going into the year. He's coming off injury, but if he's anywhere as explosive as he was last year, they could definitely have some success this year for sure. But great history, of course, some bad history as well with Bob Irsay, one of the worst owners in the history of sports, and famously moving the team out of Baltimore in the middle of the night to Indianapolis. One of the biggest gut punches an owner will ever give to a team. I mean, I don't know who was worse. Sam Kroenke, the owner of the Rams, or Bob Irsay, the owner of the Colts. I don't know. They're both pretty terrible owners, and both deserve infamy for sure. We'll put them in the 1 Super Bowl because they do have the 1 Super Bowl, even though it's as big of a fluke as you will ever find in the history of football. Not a lot of success other than that. Had some playoff runs in the late 2000s, had some early success in the 2000s with Curtis Martin. 90s, not too much. Mid 2010s, not a lot. They've basically been treading water more or less the last couple of years. Aaron Rodgers is back healthy. I don't think it's really going to bring him much success, despite what Jets fans think. Oh, we got all these guys. Oh, we're going to be so good. Just like, well, that's what you said last year. And then Aaron Rodgers goes down. And offensive line got better. They just got a guy that's really Tyron Smith, who's always hurt. He hasn't had a full season since like the last 5 years or so, something like that. But definitely have some history, but just not a lot of good history, to be honest. The Lions are one of the worst teams of all time, but no, we'll put them here. I'll be nice because they had success in the 50s and the 60s. Of course, the curse of Bobby Lane, and they finally won 2 playoff games this year, and they probably turned the corner. Now, I don't think Jared Goff is the best quarterback out there, but he's doing great. They're still making moves. They've had a pretty darn good offseason, improving the defense, and they've had success here at times. So I'm not going to put them in the worst of all time because they have won NFL championships, and if you know my stance, NFL championships matter just as much as Super Bowls, despite what the majority of NFL analysts think today. NFL champions are just as good as Super Bowls, and they definitely are in the bridesmaid and not the bride, just because they've had success in the past, just no Super Bowl success. But they are one of the more longer run franchises in the league, and I think they've turned the corner and could be up for a Super Bowl in the next couple years. The Eagles. The Eagles have their 1 Super Bowl in 2018. They had a Super Bowl run in the late 70s. Of course, they ran into the juggernaut that was the Raiders at the time, and they famously lost that game big. But I'm not a big fan of the Eagles. Don't like their fans. Although now, and especially since they're playing the Packers in Brazil this year, it gives a chance for the Packers to beat them down in Brazil. Although, let's be honest, it'll be a pretty good game. Have good pedigree at times, or they've a lot of the times in the 2000s, they were the bridesmaid and not the bride, because the famous 5 NFC championship games that all ended in losses. Donovan McNabb can never get them over the top. They have a good quarterback now, Jalen Hurts, although I think he's been figured out and will continue to slowly slide down because I think people have figured out to a large degree. Good success still, just not one of my favorite teams of all time. Seahawks. They have the one Super Bowl win, but let's be honest, I think they should have another win because they played the Steelers in Super Bowl 40 and they were screwed. They were totally screwed. The refs totally screwed them in that game. And frankly, they should have 2 Super Bowl victories. And sorry, Steelers fans, but the refs rigged the game for the Steelers in that game for sure. And if not for that, they would have had more Super Bowls. 80s, not a lot of success. 90s, just kind of treading water here and there. 2000s, that one Super Bowl run. The mid 2000s, one of the greatest defensive performances in the Super Bowl history, one of the great defenses of all time, of course, the Legion of Boom. And they've been kind of treading water. They missed the playoffs last year, and they got a new coach in Mike McDonald, but to be honest, I think Geno Smith is going to be their Achilles heel again this year because I just don't think he's that great, and he frankly doesn't deserve the credit that he gets. Baltimore Ravens. They have great pedigree, and ever since they came to the league after becoming morphing from the Browns to the Ravens, they've been a great team. They've had great success. Not a lot of long periods of bad play. They have the 2 Super Bowl wins, one of the greatest defenses of all time. The early 2000s with Ray Lewis and beating the Giants, just whooping the Giants in the Super Bowl. The famous one against the 49ers where the NFL tried to rig that game because Ravens were beating down the 49ers so bad, and then all of a sudden someone turned the lights out, couldn't turn them back on. I think that was all a total rigging in favor of the 49ers to get them back in that game. They've just been one of the most consistent teams in the NFL since they've come to the league, but they've also had a lot of failures. Like this last year, Lamar Jackson just taking it upon himself to just roll the ball when he didn't have to, when he had one of the best running attacks in the game, and then he started throwing the ball. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? But yeah, they're great pedigree for sure. Yeah, probably in the top 10 teams of all time just because they just had so much success. The Raiders. I'm going to go here. The Raiders are a great team. Several Super Bowls in the 70s and the 80s. Famously had a Super Bowl. Could have had a Super Bowl win against the Buccaneers, but like I said before, with Bill Callahan not changing signals and John Gruden picking up on that and the defense picking him off all night long, basically they've been pretty bad the last 10, 15 years. Some playoffs here and there, but nothing major. I mean, if not for Derek Carr breaking his leg, who knows how far the Raiders could have gone in the playoffs a couple years ago. But great pedigree for sure. One of the great run teams of all time. Al Davis, true renegade of the NFL. One of the owners you truly have to respect just for his way, for his chutzpah towards the league. Just deserves all the credit in the world. And sadly, his son is just not up to the task. Not up to the task. The LA Rams have won Super Bowl. We'll put them above the Jets. Oh, yeah, we'll do that. The Rams have definitely been in LA a couple times. Had some success in the 70s that never amounted to much. The 80s, never the same thing. The 90s, not much. With the Rams had the greatest show on turf, of course. Winning one Super Bowl there. Of course, they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And just not a lot to say about the Rams. They've had good times. They've had bad times. And if not for running into, would have had another Super Bowl, but they ran to Tom Brady and the Patriots and had a great kicker win them in the game. No one likes to admit, talk about Vinatieri and Tom Brady, but Tom Brady has had a Vinatieri bailment more times than anybody else. So, yeah, a lot of Tom Brady bashing, but it's like, it's totally deserved. It's totally deserved. Bengals, bridesmaid, not the bride. Had some success in the 70s. They played against the 49ers twice in the Super Bowl. We're so close to winning, but always the 49ers seem to get the last run and win the game. Never could quite get over the hump. Famously played in the Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Rams and came up short again because of stupid penalties at the end. But again, long periods of not having success. Some different periods of success as well, just not enough at time. But they do have the quarterback, or Joe Burrow should be ready to go this year. Or a good wide receivers. Defense should be fine. So maybe they come back to where they were a couple years ago. But who knows? The Titans are definitely one of the bridesmaids and not the bride. Came up inches short in that Super Bowl against the greatest show on turf. Success with Warren Moon in the 90s. The Chris Johnson years were kind of successful. Steve McNair had some run as well. And they may have found their quarterback in the future in Will Levis, but who knows? And not much to say about this organization either. One of those teams of all time, to be honest. Falcons definitely belong up here as the bridesmaid, not the bride. They've failed so many times throughout their playoff histories. Had lots of success for a lot of time, or post 80s, like the 70s and the 80s. They were terrible. They were really bad. Even though they had a couple of times to make Super Bowl runs, but they ran to the Cowboys a couple of times, ran into the Vikings as well. 90s ran into John Elway, that lost. And of course, 28-3. 28-3 is something they'll never be able to get over. I'm sorry. I don't care how people think how good Kirk Cousins supposedly is. He's a 36-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear. And you're paying him like $100 million guaranteed. I'm sorry. That's just not going to work out for you in the long run. One of my least favorite teams of all time for sure. Because they break your heart all the time. Wasn't a Saints fan, so I definitely don't like the Falcons either. Giants. Definitely up there for sure. Because they not only have the Super Bowl success with the 2 in the 2000s, they have the 2 in the 80s, and they have the championships in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So another one of the oldest teams of all time. Great success, a great family name. The Maher family has run this team forever. Still just kind of treading water right now. Who knows what they're going to do this year, because they're probably in a transition year, just waiting to see what they can get out of Daniel Jones, but had long periods of success in several different coaches, several different teams, and they're definitely one of the better teams of all time, and they deserve it. They're just a great team, great name, and they deserve the props that they get. The Arizona Cardinals are definitely one of the worst teams of all time, may even be the worst. Because besides that Super Bowl run against the Steelers, where they famously lost that game in the end, a lot of periods of unsuccess. Although they still have one of the beneficiaries of one of the greatest playoff regular season calls in NFL history, Paul Allen, with them beating the Vikings and keeping the Vikings out of the playoffs in 2003. But not a long period of success. I mean, they're just one of those teams. They're just, the Arizona Cardinals. It's one of those things, like, it's a surprise when they are good. And then they quickly fall out of favor, and they're back to the basement. And I think they're back in the basement right now, although they could be a couple pieces away from moving up. They still have Kyler Murray, so maybe they can turn around, but I think they're at least a year or two away from getting back to playoff form. But definitely one of the worst teams of all time, and as the list shows, they are the worst team of all time, in my opinion. Steelers belong up there, of course, best of all time, one of the best of all time, 6 Super Bowls, not a lot of championship success. They were terrible in the 60s, and then 70s came around, they became an absolute juggernaut. Of course, that was steroids. 80s, they were good. 90s, they had some Super Bowl runs. They were almost in the Super Bowl in the early 2000s against a Tom Brady-led team. I mean, a game where Tom Brady famously led his team to 0 points, but Steelers still found a way to lose. And of course, Super Bowls in the 2000s, even though there should be an asterisk on the Super Bowl 48 because the refs totally rigged that game. Lots of bad calls against the Seahawks in that game. Definitely deserved to be one of the best of all time, but they're not better than the other three in front of them. And last but not least, the Miami Dolphins. We'll put them right about here. Super Bowl success in the 70s. Never could quite get anything done with Marino, it's sad to say. And ever since Marino, they've just been having a bunch of different quarterbacks, famously known for not having success in the cold, which is usually where they were playing when it came to the Super Bowls, because they're never quite the best team, so they always end up having to go somewhere cold, or they always end up having to play on the road in the playoffs, and as a result, they're still just looking for their next Super Bowl, which they haven't had since the early 70s. I think the last Super Bowl they won was the team that famously didn't lose. Famous undefeated season. But, yeah, they've definitely had success. One of the better teams, not quite in the top 10. Yeah, just outside the top 10, but definitely deserve the pedigree that they have because of the multiple Super Bowl victories, but just fallen a little bit short in the last 10 to 20 years. But that is the list. Let me know what you think down below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. As I know, I hate saying that, but let me know what you think down below. Otherwise, have a great day. And as always,